Howdy, y'all. So I've got an interesting one here. So you've probably seen this if you've watched anything I've put out there before. You've probably seen this truck. It's a 2003 F-150. Had a 4.6 in it. Keyword had. Um, about 3 months ago, we were pulling up to Lowe's and got out, went to Lowe's, did my stuff, came back out, started the truck up, and it made a horrible racket and died. Would not start again. You could audibly hear it was missing at least 4 cylinders. And turned out it was the timing chain. So the timing chain on the driver's side here, the tensioner, I believe, had been bad for a while because I've been making a racket, and that was on my list of things to do, was to go through the timing set and redo the timing set. But I hadn't made it to that. I was about a week out from doing that job, and I missed it. So your timing chain's making noise, change your timing chain. But anyway, the tensioner on the driver's side failed some time ago and had been sitting there slapping against the guide. Eventually the guide broke into a million pieces. It jumped timing about 90 degrees, I would say, from what I could tell when I had it apart. And every single valve on this side went dink into all the pistons, stuck a borescope down in there. All the pistons had gashes in them. And then beyond that, every single rocker follower in here was snapped in half. So probably needs a new cylinder head. But otherwise, this engine actually is in really good condition. It looks really clean on the inside, which is really sad. So, but anyway, stuck with the dilemma of, okay, well, this truck has 325,000 miles on it. Do we want to put another engine in it, or do we want to, just leave it? Well, if you know anything about me, I keep stuff going as long as I possibly can. And to me, a car is not as old as it has miles on it. It's more of an airframe life kind of thing. So if the truck and everything else is in good condition, relatively speaking, minus the aesthetic problems here and there, I will use it until it either gets in a wreck or explodes or whatever. So anyway, that kind of gets us into what we decided to do with it. Started doing some looking on the forums and thinking, just going to put another 4.6 in it. Well, I decided I wanted more power, so I swapped in a 5.4. So this swap was actually really easy to do. And you may not believe me, but it was actually really easy to do. The 4.6 and the 5.4 are very, very similar engines. The 5.4 just has a slightly higher deck, a deck surface. Therefore, the engine's a little bit wider and just a hair taller, giving you more displacement because it's got a longer stroke. So anyway, so this is a 5.4 I scrounged out of a 2000 F-150. I wanted something out of a 2003 or later, maybe out of an Econoline or something, because of the fixed or revised plug holes. Not the 3-valve 5.4, it's 2-valve 5.4, but they fixed the spark plug issue where it blows a spark plug out. They added more threads on the spark plug holes. But this is an older model, but I went through and inspected every single plug hole. There were no inserts or anything in any of the plug holes, so we're good there. So keep your motorcraft plugs in there and torque them to whatever Ford spec says, and go actually a little bit beyond that. I think 25 to 27 foot-pounds is what you want on these older 5 or 2 valves. But anyway, going into what I did for the swap here, those who are keen might notice that is an aluminum intake, which 5.4s did not have except for one model year, and that was 1999. So I actually had a crappy, this engine came with a crappy Dorman plastic intake, and you could tell it had been leaking. And you can't even get a factory Ford replacement intake anymore, and those are still plastic, but you can't even get those anymore in day and age 2022 because they're all in back order, and it doesn't look like Ford's making them anymore. And I didn't really want to deal with leaky mess from Dorman and their crappy Dorman gaskets. So I did some research, and it turns out if this aluminum intake will fit any model year 5.4 up to, as long as it's a 2-valve, up to, no, okay, I take that back. It will fit PI heads. So that is 99 to, as long as they made 2-valve 5.4s. So that I highly recommend. It's really easy. I did have to do a couple of hose modifications. The heater hose was one. I probably need to find a better solution for that because it's kind of kinking there if you can see it. But minor detail. Everything works on it, so I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, all the accessories are the same. All the drive belt pulleys are the same. The only thing I had to play with was the motor mounts. I had to get some for a 5.4 because this is an 03, so that they changed the motor mounts a little bit between, I think, 2001 and 2003. There were 2 different revisions, and I had to find the right one because it's weird. They did it by month, not by year. So month of production, I should say. But yeah, as far as everything else goes, everything is direct fit. I am using a 5.4 wiring harness. The wiring harness that was on this engine originally stuck with the engine, and I just plugged it directly in to the truck harness. And as far as I can tell, there are no issues. Everything works great. No electrical issues whatsoever, as far as I can tell. I have heard if you can use a 4.6 wiring harness, but on some connections you do have to lengthen the pigtails. So I leave that up to your discretion. If you can find an intact 5.4 wiring harness, definitely do so. But I know most junkyards, it's kind of hard to find intact wiring harnesses because we all know those problems. Luckily, I was in luck enough to get this whole engine, trans, wiring harness, accessories, everything for a really, really good price. But I got all of it. Another thing you need to note is if you swap in a 5.4 from a 4.6 and you don't swap your transmission, you have to use a different torque converter on the transmission. I think it's a slightly higher stall. Don't quote me. I don't remember. It's been a little bit. But they have a different stall on the torque converter. And if you do that, if you use a 5.4 with a 5.4 tune on a 5.4 computer, it will eventually kill your trans. So you need to swap in the correct torque converter, or do what I did, and I just swapped the whole trans over from that. So this whole drivetrain is from a different truck, which was actually wrecked, so it worked out for me because the whole drivetrain was intact. So, but drive shafts, everything else are all the same. Trans cooler lines are all the same. I'm still using the original 1-core radiator, which I don't really like, and I plan on fixing eventually, but these engines run pretty cool, it appears, so nothing to worry on that front. On the computer front, that was a little tricky. So initially I left the 4.6 computer that was original to this truck, so the original 2003 F-150 VIN whatever computer in this truck, and ran it, and the engine didn't know the difference because the firing orders and the sensor layout, wiring harness layout, everything is identical on the 4.6 and 5.4. That's what makes this swap so easy. So I ran it for probably 2 weeks on the original computer, and no check engine lights or anything. It ran perfect. A little low on power for 5.4, but I mean, compared to the 4.6 and the power the 4.6 put out, it still felt like more power and more torque. Definitely more torque. But I also acquired, along with the drivetrain and everything else, the original computer that came out of the same truck that this powertrain came out of. So 2000, I think it was an extended cab off an F-150. But anyway, long story short, I swapped that computer in, and for those who don't know, the computer is right behind the battery. All you have to do to get at it is there's a 10 mil nut or 10 mil bolt there. Unscrew that, harness comes out, and then you come into your passenger footwell. You pull this panel out, and there's just a little retaining clip. You pull that off, and you can just slide your whole computer out. Stuck the other computer in there, and of course, with these trucks, they have the stupid PATS key. passive anti-theft system, I think is what it stands for. And that was a little bit of an ordeal. There is a program you can get for your Windows computers or whatever called ForScan. To use the PATS feature on it, I think you do have to pay a little license fee. It's like $10. It's worth it for the entire year. And I've actually had to use it once again since I put this computer in, so it actually worked out really well. But I had to sit there and play with it for a while because the instrument cluster and the computer didn't want to talk to each other because they had different VINs on them. Apparently the instrument cluster is programmed with a VIN, from what I understand. So they had conflicting VINs, conflicting PATS codes. So there's an initialization procedure you can do to initialize a replaced PCM. And that basically lets the instrument cluster know, hey, this PCM isn't original, so just deal with it. Once I did that, I could clear the stored keys on the swapped in computer from the 2004 and program the new keys. And I did the ignition key form of programming. So I did two. I programmed. I have actually 4 keys to this truck. So I programmed. Focus. I programmed 2 of the ignition keys, and then from that point, you can just use the built-in form of put your key in. You can go look it up on YouTube. There's tons of tutorials on how to do that, but basically you can program it without using a computer. Up to, I think, 6 keys. So, but yeah, that was a pretty darn easy swap. I did go through the motor. I did throw a new timing set on this motor. I think this motor had 200,000 miles on it. But I did pull the bearings, the main bearing caps on it when I had it out on the stand, and they looked freaking beautiful. These modular engines, or these earlier modular engines, seem to wear very evenly and very slowly, which is incredible. Now, given they were aluminum bearings, but I did throw some. You're gonna hate me. I ran some of this Cleveite. Some of this Cleveite. That was me being El Cheapo. This stuff. Everyone knows what this is if you've ever opened up an engine and don't feel like getting a micrometer and testing the bearings. But you can basically tell how many thou of bearing clearance you have, and relatively speaking, you can get a decent idea. And the more squished out it is, the less clearance there is, and the better off you are most of the time. But anyway, this engine had great bearing clearance on or like minimal bearing clearance, I should say, on the main caps and the rod bearings. So healthy engine. The engine looked excellent when I had it open. I did not pull the cylinder heads just because I didn't want to. The head bolts alone for this engine for one set is like $50, or not $50. That's a 302. It was ridiculous. I didn't really feel like paying that for 2 sets of head bolts. If you do pull your bearings or do anything with the crank, you have to replace the those are torque to yield bolts on the main bearings. So you have to replace those bolts. That I did learn the hard way. I threw the old bolts back in and felt like, these feel like they're twisting. And sure enough, they were already yielded, and I was about to break them off. So that would have been really, really bad. Those bolts, I think, are also relatively expensive, but it was better to know what the bearings looked like. So that was worth it in my mind. But yeah, hopefully we get another 200,000 miles out of this motor. It's doing awesome so far. It's got loads of power, way more power than I cannot even believe how much more power this thing has than a stock 4.6. Just throwing the computer in alone was the biggest difference ever. Actually kind of makes me wonder how a 5.4 computer would do in a 4.6. Probably not good, but long term anyway, but I'm kind of curious to see. So anyway, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I will go through them and try to answer them as best as I can. But it was a really simple swap, pretty much direct drop in. While you have everything apart, you might as well change all your rubber components like motor mounts and stuff like that. I didn't change any hoses or anything, just because everything was actually in really good shape for how old this thing is. I mean, you remember this is an 03, the last year of this model, I guess, and 20 years old, just about 20 years old now. But for how old it is, it was in really good shape. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything else is pretty much stock, minus the aluminum intake. That was, I'm really proud of that. So there's not a lot of information about it online, so that was pretty fun. I do believe this aluminum intake has a different alternator bracket, so you do have to keep that if you find one. But yeah, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll do what I can to answer it. And yeah, thanks for watching.